All right, so there's one thing I forgot, guys. The lights that you have in this space are two very different kinds of lights. Your Cove light and your can lights need to look differently, okay? Because when you turn the intensity of one up, you might need to turn the intensity of another one down. I'm sure in your kitchens, for the most part, you probably have two different types of lights in your kitchen. That's because you need task lighting and you need, ambient lighting or whatever it is to fill up the space. So all we need to do before we render is make sure that we create another spotlight. Well, another kind of light. So I'm going to create and introduce one more kind of light. So right now this is a spotlight emitter. Let's duplicate that. And let's call this emitter Cove. There we go. Now, emitter Cove is going to look a little bit different in terms of how we're going to look at the fill of that light. So what we have here is basically the light source and how much the light spreads into the space and how far it reaches into the space. So what we're going to do is switch it to emitter IES. Do I want to use IES? We could probably. I don't think we want to use spot. Yeah, let's switch it to emitter IES. It's going to look really intense, especially if you have it set up to like 1,000 watts or something like that. Even if you reduce it, it shouldn't really change that much to like 350. This is an IES light. It's basically like an ambient or diffuse lighting source that comes from something that's more of a field. So anyway, we're gonna IES. There we go. Switch the projection to IES as well. Okay, so we're gonna stick with that. The only other thing I think I want you guys to take a look at is color. So this is our first, I guess, time that we're actually changing the color of a light, and at least under my guidance, this is the first time. So what we have here is color temperature. Color temperature is broken down in degrees Kelvin. And I'm not a physicist, so I couldn't give you a really accurate answer why. But what you should know is that the higher the degree Kelvin, the cooler the light. And the lower the degree Kelvin, the warmer the light. So, for instance, a typical like living room lamp is all the way down at 2700 Kelvin. In some cases, if you're going to go for like an old school, like rustic looking lamp with really yellow filament and an amber lens glass, it's going to be all the way down to say 2000 Kelvin. So that's something to be aware of. You may actually want to change the color of your spots to be a little bit warmer and your coves to be a little bit brighter, or vice versa. So what we're going to do is increase, or rather decrease, our Kelvin to say, I think we'll start with something like 3500 Kelvin for this. And it doesn't have to be exact, you can just approximate it. And then when you play that, it's going to turn it a little bit more yellow. Okay? So with that, that might actually be a little too yellow, but we'll use it anyway. So we actually need to make another layer. I'm going to duplicate the can light layer, and I'm going to call it Cove light. This one I'll make yellow. Yeah, sure. No, not yellow. Actually, I just almost made a big faux pas, or mistake, I would say. Don't ever use yellow as a layer in Rhino unless you change the color of your selections, because then you don't know what you selected. So never use actual yellow. Anyway, so let's go up here. I'm going to grab my surface, if I can get up there. I'm going to switch it to Cove light. Drop my emitter Cove on that layer. Emitter spot on that layer. I don't know why that wasn't on there before. And we should be good to go. Let me set my frame and then we'll do a draft. hope none of my settings changed. Anyway, let me let this run for a little while you guys are doing some modeling, and then we'll talk about it. Hey guys, I'm gonna just sort of review real quick on this one and show you how I got what I have here on screen. And it's not what I did with you. It's a little different. So what I set up before was this. And it came out with that sort of dull brown that I think a lot of you are probably going to get. I think the first light I set up was, it was high wattage with low efficacy. So like I said before, the wattage is basically how much light is being produced, and the efficacy defines how well that light penetrates the space. So basically what this light is it's a light that doesn't penetrate the space very well. So what I did as a test was, and this is kind of what you're going to have to troubleshoot going back and forth, because there isn't really, I mean, to my knowledge, it's tough exact science to really nail, is trial by like swapping it. So unlike the environment settings where you should only modify things like once or twice, these two particular settings, wattage and efficacy, tend to react, you know, sort of in a reverse fashion when you flip them. So if you get the setting wrong for that particular kind of light, just flip it. Odds are you just need more efficacy or you need more wattage. So what I did was here is I created a light source that had, I think it was 150 watts, which is closer to a regular light bulb in the actual, you know, built environment, but it had 400 efficacy, I think. Let me double check. Yeah. So it's only 150 watts, but it has 400 efficacy. So in the preview, it's going to look kind of similar, but the result of how that light hits other surfaces, efficacy is really important for how light hits other sources. The wattage is really important for how much light fills up the space. Does that make sense? I think that's a relatively clear explanation of it. So anyway, that's what I needed to bump up, and the result I think is fairly decent. Now it still kind of looks like pastel-y because it's really grainy and it hasn't gotten to a, you know, decent enough render quality level. But you'll be able to modify this so that it's right now I have it kind of blasting on the ceiling, but you could modify it down to be, you know, a more subtle sort of illumination if you so choose. Okay. What questions do you have? Okay, we'll move on to a couple of other little tip things going on going forward.